We have a lot of information, so stay close because this is really revolutionary. We have Josh Weinstock from Twitter is joining us today, and Josh was kind enough to come down, and he's a former journalist.
Former journalist, current social media person. I don't know how best to describe myself, but
you could tweet about it. Then you could describe yourself well, because if you don't like the first one, you could erase it and do it again.
Well, I'd have to do it in with a lot of brevity because I'd only have 140 characters. Right?
We have to talk about that, by the way, because I'm kind of new to Twitter, and I feel like I need almost like the Chinese have characters. I need a dictionary.
I brought my Twitter dictionary, so we can. I didn't actually. It's not a hard, but we can definitely dive into that. That'll be fun, actually. And I think there's a lot to talk about. The communication has changed a lot. Twitter helps change it. I'm proud of that. I like what we do with that, and I think about that every day. That stuff. So
So that's the name of our show. The name of our show is Communicating in the 21st Century, and how Twitter and social media is changing the way we communicate with one another. We're also going to be covering some other issues. We're going to be doing comparisons between all the types of social media. We're also going to be looking at some other things that are a little bit more interesting, like fake news and all that stuff, and where we get our news sources, and what can we believe, and how do we differentiate between, maybe fake news, conspiracy, and all that stuff. But Josh, I want to hear about you. I want to hear about, I'm really interested because you're a former journalist. I don't know how long you did that and how you transitioned into Twitter, but I imagine they're connected. So
sure. And I think I've always loved to talk. I've never shut up. My parents used to tell me, shut up sometimes, let the room breathe.
I can understand that.
Yeah. And so from that background, I knew I wanted to get into something where I got to communicate with people, talk to people, and I always was fascinated by the news too. And particularly as a sports fan, I'd love to keep up on the latest stats and who won this, who lost, and why. And so I went to college in Chicago. I went to Northwestern, studied journalism, got a great education, got to announce games on the radio. So I got to kind of fulfill that sports passion, that fandom. That was my path. I was going to be on the radio,
a sports announcer.
I was going to be
right?
a play-by-play sports announcer.
Right.
And I did that both in college, and then shortly after college, I worked in minor league baseball. I was announcing games for a team in Kentucky, the Tampa Bay Rays Class A affiliate. They were the Bowling Green Hot Rods. It's the home of the infamous Bowling Green Massacre.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. Actually, what's funny is that I was in Bowling Green at the alleged time of the massacre.
Wow.
Yes.
You must have been really terrified.
It was scary. Yeah,
You must have been scared.
Speaking of fake news and speaking of
Yes.
conspiracy theories and all of that. Yeah. So that was an interesting stretch. Of course, not because of any massacres, but because of
what you dodged.
Yes.
I imagine you were smart enough to stay away from that.
I was in the clear there, but I didn't dodge working as the team's mascot when we weren't on the radio. So that was what I did in addition to being, the play-by-play voice of the team. And I cleaned the bleachers, and I sold tickets, and it was basically
they got their money's worth with you,
and they didn't pay me an awful lot either. I will
got a big bang for their buck.
I will tell you right now, it was barely enough to get by. And you didn't know anybody in Kentucky. I mean, I'm from LA originally, and so this is home for me. So it was a rough life, and it's hard. It's when you get through that phase where you say, this is what I think my calling is, or what I want to be, or what I want to do, and then you end up doing it, and it's not as you pictured it or what you envisioned. And you find yourself having to reassess and figure out what you're going to do next. So I knew I loved journalism. I knew I missed home. I came back here. I moved in with the parents for a stretch. I'm still about 22. And I broke into entertainment, into public relations. So I worked in PR, movies, and TV for about 5 years. That kind of transitioned me over to a more of a sales job that I now have at Twitter. But period, when you think of PR, you think of sales and marketing. You're talking about communication and how you relate to people, and how you take a message and spread it out to a wider audience. And I've always been fascinated by that. I think what I get to do now, what I've done for the last, even that minor league job, maybe not the mascot part, but that's always been about communicating and taking a message that you can kind of extrapolate and using those tools the right way to get the message out there.
We talked about that on the show, because the show is all about living outside the box and how sometimes you go in one direction, but it's meant to lead you to something else. I mean, did you feel like the sports do you use any of that now?
Oh, absolutely. And an analytical mind about sports in general and thinking about statistics and thinking about strategy and all of that, I think you can use that approach with anything you do in life. I'm sure you can relate in the day-to-day stuff, but also in wherever you professionally land. So yeah, I still think that way. I still get to dabble with some of the cool sports things that happen on Twitter. I mean, one of the things Twitter today is best known for, I think, and one of the things I use it for as a consumer rather than, just somebody who works there, is to keep up on what's happening in the sports world, right? If we just had the NCAA tournament and March Madness and all of that. And if I couldn't watch the games live, I was finding out minute by minute what was happening on Twitter.
Right, with 126 characters or less.
Well,
or is that right?
It's the 140, right? I see. Well, and you lose some, right? Sometimes formerly with a hashtag, with an @ mention, right?
Yeah.
With some of those, kind of core pieces to a tweet, you used to lose your characters by using them, right? You want to tag something with a hashtag so it's sorted into a conversation. Twitter, I think, for the better, and this was a big upgrade, has made it now that those hashtags, those @ mentions, don't detract from your 140 characters. So you have more room.
Oh, wow.
Now.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's more space to fill that tweet window with your thoughts. And what you see a lot of the best tweeters, the Donald Trumps, even, let's give him credit, the guy knows how to tweet, he's good at it. He'll do sort of his sometimes he'll number his tweets, right? Like 1, here's my message. 2, here's another message, sort of a tweet storm, right? So he'll get 5 or 6 tweets across, and so that limitation on Twitter, you can get past it by numbering your tweets, or kind of clearly.
What does that do exactly if you number your tweets?
Well, it just gives you that sort of
chronological context.
Yes, and so someone might argue, why didn't you get this message across on a platform that allows for more characters, namely Facebook, right? If Facebook is the one where there isn't a character limit, you could go longer.
Right.
But I think people expect to connect with influencers, with the influential people in the world on Twitter before they do on Facebook. The way I usually describe it, what's the difference between Facebook and Twitter? I think the Facebook thing is how you talk to people or people you used to know that you're trying to reconnect with, and Twitter is how you talk to people you wish you knew.
Yeah.
The Donald Trump, or
maybe
not
you
so
wish
much.
You could, if
connect
you're
with.
Yeah, exactly.
How
many followers do you think does Donald Trump even have?
Oh,
do we know? I guess we do know.
I
I
do know it's more than 27 million now. He's done well. I mean, but put that in context. Katy Perry has 100 million followers on Twitter. I believe Katy Perry is the most followed Twitter account in the world.
She's the most followed tweeter.
She is. She's a VIT, as we say, a very important tweeter.
Interesting.
Very important. The most important tweeter, you could argue, if we're talking just scale and reach.
How did Twitter even start? You said that they're having their 11th birthday.
Yeah, Twitter just celebrated its 11th birthday, so happy birthday, Twitter.
Should we do like a little birthday dance?
Maybe we'll do one after.
At the end.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. We'll save that.
We'll save that. Stick around.
Yeah, extra features, right?
So how did Twitter even start? Like I never even thought to ask this, but it's a good question.
And I need to do a little more homework myself. And my context is I've been at Twitter for almost a year now. It's been about 11 months. And I've used Twitter for the last 5 or 6 years, more casually and more to take in content, right? To follow brands and people I want to keep up with versus tweeting myself. There's a really good book. It's a New York Times columnist. I forget his name, but called Hatching Twitter, which really dives into the past and the story of Twitter and how it started in the first place. I know there are 3 co-founders, and the one who's still prominent and CEO of Twitter today is Jack Dorsey. Jack Dorsey is, I think, a genius and somebody who's really someone fun to look up to and work under and respect and kind of just follow in the path he's leading us on. I know that sounds like a lot of lip service, but it's really true. He's like,
well, I mean, he's obviously a visionary.
Yeah.
Did Twitter start before Facebook? Or were they at the same time?
Facebook was before Twitter.
Okay.
So Facebook started before Twitter, and a lot of people have seen the Social Network movie,
yes.
which very loosely, I think, kind of recounts that story. But that's essentially it, and Mark Zuckerberg and all that. And Twitter was afterwards and served a different purpose, I think, was meant to be a vessel of punchy, kind of quicker sort of stream of consciousness thinking in how we communicate versus Facebook, which could be much more fleshed out.
Right. Almost like a blog.
Right. Well, and, I think with Twitter, too, the idea is that if you take just 140 characters, you take just a condensed message like that, people are more prone to share. They're more prone to be honest and to just almost spitball their ideas on in a place where
like
those
a platform,
right, on a platform,
right.
Very much so is what it is, where those ideas live forever, really, too. We can look back and see a tweet that was posted in 2007, which is right around when the company started, right? And that's fascinating. I think one of the things marketers and brands are most interested in when they think of Twitter is the data pool that's there to look back on. I heard Jack Dorsey once described it this way, which fascinated me, as almost the human brain in basically digital form. Yeah. It's almost like this AI experience where if you looked back over 11 years now at this body of tweets, all of, the billions of tweets, tens of billions, I think, of tweets that have been published over 11 years. What an encyclopedia of just human experience, period. Of how people think, how they react to things, the instinct of a moment, right? Like and that is what the platform is best known for today. And I think what it really should be used for is keeping up with the moment, the what's happening right now. Which
makes sense because we're all trying to live in the moment, and none of us really do. But but you can at least see where you were at that moment,
right?
Because it's there forever.
Exactly, and you can see how you reacted in spur of the moment kind of situations. Like this happened. We all remember when Prince died. Well, I learned about Prince dying on Twitter. That was the first place I saw it, and I tweeted about it. And if I look back now and I read that tweet, I think I'd feel. The feeling would come back, you know what I mean? It kind of puts you back in that mental space that you were in that moment. But right now it should be used for the right now. You know what I mean? You're right. We're always trying to live in the present. And so,
I mean, the funny thing is that all this stuff, I mean, including Instagram, it kind of takes us away from living in the moment because we're going to that extra step of thinking about how do we translate this so that we can share it.
Yes.
So I mean, there is something that we're giving up in that process. Speaking of which, I do have to say that I think about all this stuff I'm putting on Facebook. I have this Facebook page. I don't know if I told you about that. It's Mystic Madison. Like it,
I'll have to go
like it. Yeah. But it's a blog, and I post about the show, and I post about other things. But even on my regular Facebook page, I think to myself, wow, like someday I'm not going to be here anymore. Right. And like my great grandchildren can read about what I wrote or the pictures I took. I mean, I wonder what they do with that information. Like, as people are no longer here and this information's public, and I mean, 100 years from now, are people going to randomly go back and study everybody's lives?
Will this be what legacy do we leave almost is the legacy we leave on our social pages? Now, I mean, we leave it with our children and with their children and, our friends and the people that remember us. But yeah, like the most documented, the most kind of holistic version of ourselves is the selves we leave on the pages of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff.
It's kind of weird.
It is weird. It's not ideal in my book. It's funny. I mean, I work at Twitter, and my mindset for many years was I couldn't stand social media. I couldn't stand what you were talking about taking us outside of our here and now, having a conversation face to face. And granted, we're streaming it across the interwebs, as they say.
Right.
but no, that human connection that you can't get necessarily across a platform, or and that being said, I do think that these platforms give us something that we would miss if we didn't have nowadays.
Now
right?
that we know about them.
Yeah, I and now that we use them
we
incessantly,
can't unlearn it.
we can't unlearn it, and I think it's good that we can't, because I think everything in moderation. But I've made connections with people, and connections that have led to the personal, to the sitting here together, kind of through these tools that are invaluable and have changed my life. And I think most people have some story to tell on that front.
Yes. I do for sure.
Right, and the platforms have made us have made our world smaller. They've brought us closer together, and sometimes further apart too. But I think their nature is to bring us into some level of common ground, which we need as much as ever right now. And I'm proud of some of the things you get to say that Twitter has worked on or done. Movements, right, and actual social change and things like that have come from people using a hashtag, sharing what's happening in their neck of the world,
right,
building awareness that somebody across the globe can support and take action themselves. I think that's important.
It's funny, like I almost wonder what came first, the chicken or the egg. It's so perfect that this is all happening now, when people really do need to connect. And we're kind of in the middle of not just a communication revolution, but there's so much going on at the moment. Much, much more. And everybody is so hyper aware, whether or not that's because the news, there's just everything is more in your face. I mean, I wonder about that. Was it like this before and we just didn't know it? Because it just seems like now everybody's being called to action all the time.
Sure. Sure. I know. I feel like I take up a different cause every day, and like I have like another mission every day. And because it's hard, if I go on Twitter and I'll see what's trending, and I'll see something trending that for me, and I think for most people, Twitter is a discovery platform where you don't go to Twitter necessarily searching for something is already there. You go to Twitter because you want to find something new or learn something new. And almost every day when I go on, I do find out about something new. And oftentimes it's something that's not good about our world that I'd love to try to fix or help or change or any of that. And it's hard. It's like you take down a list of causes and missions and initiatives and things you want to do to make the world a better place, and then you run out of room on the page. Like there's not enough room for all of the things that we should be doing to help.
What was the breaking point for you, Josh? Like when you decided, you were saying earlier, well, I was like not a social media person. I wasn't necessarily a Twitter.
Right.
How did that change for you? Just because
I got the job? No.
Because I had to.
No, that's not really true.
Right. I didn't think it was.
I mean, I think, again, it's what I said with the power of the platform to make those more personal connections. The few instances when I've reached out. Actually, a really funny example was a few years back. I was at the Sundance Film Festival, and I used to work, in PR in movies, and so that was an event that
You've covered a lot of ground. You had sports, you had movies.
Still do movies for Twitter, really. That's what I do there. But yes, it's social and it's different. Yeah, no, for sure. Hopefully we'll cover plenty more down the road. But anyway, I'm out in Park City in Utah at the Sundance Film Festival, and it's about 10 p.m. or 9 or something like that, and it's a cold, like kind of windy night. It's beautiful there. If you haven't been,
I've been.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I'd go every year if I could.
Oh God, me too.
It's nice.
It's my favorite. So I'm at that, I think it's called like Atticus or something like that. The coffee shop.
Is it the one at the top of the hill?
It's more toward the bottom.
No, I don't. Maybe it wasn't there. I haven't.
There's one at the top called like the Java Cow.
Yes.
That one's my like little hangout.
Yeah,
work
where you
zone.
get breakfast and stuff.
Yeah, but there's one down near the bottom. It's more of like a gift shop, and really it's cozy and it's cool. And I'm in there and I'm getting a coffee with a couple colleagues who are there with me, and Drew Brees walks in. Drew Brees, the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. And
I wouldn't know, but I'm glad you mentioned for the people that do know,
the sports fans listening. Yeah. And he's there with his wife, and they're bundled up and they're cute and they're having a nice like festival together. But of course, I'm like so excited to see him, and I go up to him and I Drew, I'm sorry to bug you. I know you're here on vacation. Can I just take a photo with you? And he reluctantly agrees. I could tell he was not having it, but we take a photo together and I tweet it. I posted it on Twitter and I tagged the New Orleans Saints, the team. And in about 5 minutes, they retweeted it. And in a matter of an hour, and I kept checking my phone, like, oh my God, I'm getting all these likes and retweets. But I got like hundreds of likes and retweets on my tweet. And it was so exciting. And like, you know, I used to say like, oh guys, don't share every little detail that happens in your life on Twitter. We don't need to know about it. But it was really empowering and cool. It was this like special feeling to think I connected with a brand and, you know, a team that I've watched for years, that I like, a person that, you know, the personal connection of meeting him was super cool, and then getting to share it with so many fans of him and of the team.
The fact that so many people were sharing that moment with you,
exactly,
and people that you didn't know.
Exactly, it's this common ground thing. Again, it's like this universal bond that you can make with people. That you just couldn't make before you had these tools at your disposal. And I recognize the power of that. I think it's an agent for a lot of good change. Again, like I think that was a frivolous, fun one. This one was one that was just like, this is exciting and I love that it happened, but I didn't save anybody's life. I was just having a good time. But there are real, you know, missions, initiatives, and conversations happening on Twitter and other platforms too, that are, you know, changing things for the better, that really can make a difference. And so I respect it. I respect its power, and I acknowledge it, and I'm proud to work in it.
That's why I'm glad to have you on the show, because the show is, metaphysically speaking, it's about living outside the box, and it's not just about taking things at face value, but the fact that you know, I guess this thing has come along that is shifting our consciousness in a direction of being able to spread words very far.
Yes.
That's never happened before. Oh, it would happen for a select few, like somebody who maybe was a writer or a journalist, but not everybody.
We've always had different ways of, you know, spreading our message as wide as we can, but less effective ways, right? Like, and I guess,
and less quick.
Right. Sure. And so once upon a time, wasn't it FDR who would deliver his sort of fireside, you know, like on the radio, he would talk to people. And so you had to be huddled around like an old radio to be listening to the president, you know, tell you the state of the union, what's happening in the world, in your world. We move on to television, and I know that the John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon debate is iconic for how TV changed messaging and how, and perception, because we could see a sweaty Richard Nixon versus a polished, handsome JFK, and that made our decision a lot easier. We went with the good-looking one, kind of. I mean, there was more to it than
the
that.
one that was calm and collected.
Yeah, exactly.
We put our faith in.
Yeah. But and now, you know, on the presidential level, the megaphone can be Twitter, and you know, and a Donald Trump.
It's the iPhone.
Well,
really.
It's the
smartphone.
I think he actually tweets from an Android, I want to say. I feel like we can actually see what source they come from, and I feel like he's tweeted from both iPhone and Android, and you can tell, like, oh wait, if it's coming from the iPhone, it's going to be like this kind of tweet, and if it's coming from the Android,
interesting.
But anyway, that is the new you know, voice, the new mouthpiece, and you know, it's powerful. And you know, he said a number of times, and this is whatever you think, you know, whatever side you might take, I try to stay pretty in the middle or moderate about all of it, but you know, it's a powerful tool. And he said, I don't need to necessarily do an interview, I don't need to sit down with the New York Times to reach mass America.
Did Trump say that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he still does sit down with the New York Times, but he said, I can speak to the people directly because I'm on, you know, Twitter and Facebook. And it's true. If he has 27 million followers on Twitter, you know, it's not just that 27 million people immediately get his message, right? Because that is going to shoot it into their timeline. It's you know, going to be favorited enough and retweeted enough that the algorithm will point it toward all of those followers for the most part. But it's also going to be reported on by those journalists. Like the New York Times follow Donald Trump. So if Donald Trump tweets, his Twitter is a news machine, right? Like everything he tweets folds its way immediately into the news cycle. You know, and it's the power of words. And that's a big question with him or with anybody now with the platform, is that because our words are so public and because it's all out there for everybody to see, you have to be very conscious of what you're saying. You can't just willy-nilly throw.
Well, that's where I think the political correctness is coming in. I mean, I've even written things on Facebook, and then I think, oh, maybe that doesn't sound right. Maybe I should play with it more.
Right.
Maybe I should take it off. I mean, there is a little bit of a hyper vigilance of wondering, being concerned about what people will think, or wondering if you're pushed an opinion too far.
Yes.
There is some of that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, no, I agree. Yeah, no, I sometimes like, and working for Twitter is nice for me. I like very much can avoid that, and I do. I don't tend to take a stance on social with any of these things. I have my opinions about everything, right? I do land on one side or the other with Trump. I do land on one side or the other with, the daily just news cycle, whether, God forbid, wars, things that are happening today that everyone, you can't not have a feeling or a say on it. And a lot of people, I think, are very quick to just kind of push it out there and make their statement. And again, because Twitter is that one in particular, it's 140 characters, and it's such a spitball of like, just put out like your stream of conscience. A lot of people just do it, and they don't have a lot to worry about with it. There's no kind of repercussion necessarily. I know for me, I'm very measured with it, but
but you also work for Twitter.
I have to be, right. And I think I would be even if I didn't work for Twitter. Again, what I like to do more, my nature is much more to observe what everyone's saying, take the temperature of the room from the millions of people tweeting about it and see what that's about versus putting my own kind of 2 cents into it. I think it's that, at least for me, for Twitter, that's what the tool is so good for, is a conversation platform where I can observe the conversation that's happening.
Right.
If I want to, I can inject myself into it, but I'm more interested in just kind of seeing it unfold.
Am I mistaken, or I feel like I was following Obama and I never got hardly anything?
He was, yeah.
So, I just thought my Twitter wasn't working.
No, you're not wrong. It's true. He tweeted a lot less than our current president.
Like it's not even a lot. It's like
it's like night and day. It's true. Yeah. I think he was a lot more. He was busier talking to the world in a more traditional way. It's not like Obama was unreachable or was very like silent or whatever. Like the president that you couldn't connect with or come close. Because I think most people would argue that he was
right.
But I think every look, it's quite possible that Donald Trump has set a precedent for like the leader of the free world using Twitter and using the platform.
Was he tweeting before he became president?
Yeah. So,
I'm sorry. Oh wait, he was, because they're replaying, or they're, I don't know how you would call it, reposting his old tweets about what he was telling Obama to do.
Yeah, right. It's like if he does something today,
there's a little contradiction there,
which is hard for anybody because you know, and that's what I was talking about with, like, when you put it out on Twitter, it's there forever.
It's there forever,
and it's kind of just
you're held accountable.
It's true. But to answer that question, yeah, he has been on it for a while. He's always been really, really savvy with it, and I think because I've been asked by partners I work with, what do you think about the Trump Twitter page and how he uses it and stuff, and I say, he's been really successful with it. Whether you like him or you don't, there are things to probably be learned from the way he tweets, the approach he uses. Look at his tone. Like, he's punchy. He's almost he writes like a Hemingway on Twitter. And that it's like,
really,
that's giving him maybe a lot of credit. But no, if you read his tweets, it's like a very, like, 3 or 4 words, maybe the average length of a sentence. It's very punch, 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 which it's the kind of platform that demands.
So he has a certain rhythm that is very effective.
I think
with
so.
His words. That's interesting. Well, I'm not a big tweeter, as I mentioned to you, and I don't really know that much about Twitter. That's why it's really, really mesmerizing to hear you talk about it, almost like in a musical cadence kind of way. But yeah, I guess I should follow Donald Trump, and like I'll know more about what's going on.
I follow Donald Trump because I think I want to be informed about the world, and I think when he tweets it affects the world. And
Right.
And so I think it's critical. I mean, I'd probably hear about it or see it in the news anyway, even if I didn't follow him. But I'm on Twitter anyway, and I'm following the people that are influential in my world.
Right.
He's certainly one of them. So I follow his handle, and and I've observed that. Again, yeah, I do think I just don't think it's an accident that he's built such a following and has so much energy around his Twitter handle that people respond to it. It makes the news all the time. There's something in the way he uses it that is obviously compelling to a lot of people, and it's worth analyzing for those who have a different message that they want to get across. How can you take the strengths of what he does and use them to your strength, to your to your message that you want to get across?
I have a journalist question for you now, because in this age of instant news, there is a certain amount of fake news. There's also conspiracy theories. Yes. As a former journalist, what's your feeling about that? Or how, maybe we can kind of let people know how they can, is there a way to recognize?
Oh boy, I know. It's a great,
how can you educate people about what's fake and what's not?
I respect the fact that, I think Twitter, Facebook, all of the major platforms have really, I think, taken a stance on this too, and understand that a lot of what comes out that's not true is proliferated on these platforms. So it's there's a responsibility of a Facebook, of a Twitter, to combat that and try and get across what is really happening. Is there a firm, great plan in place to do that? Not yet. I think it's so hard because so many people have a voice now, right? I mean, everyone technically has a voice. And a lot of the fake news stories that you've seen that really explode over the last, 6 months, this election cycle and beyond, they come from one head, one source, right? It starts with just that first flicker, and then it gets a couple pickups, and then they get a couple pickups, and it's this sort of exponential growth effect that it's pretty hard to control. And then the good journalist out there needs to track it back to the original source and deem from there, was that original source going off an agenda, or were they going off of an attempt to tell a true story? And so often, it's that the agenda ridden, there is that part of the journalism space now that is so driven by agenda, by partisanship, and not by the fact. And I saw a great moment on camera. I think it was with Sean Hannity and Ted Koppel. And Ted Koppel, who's a legendary journalist. Sean Hannity, who's made quite a name for himself as he's quite a fixture in that world today. And I know Koppel was very critical of, partisan news. Some argue Fox News is partisan. Some argue MSNBC is partisan. Some argue CNN is partisan. Donald Trump would argue that CNN is partisan. I think it's, I think you see threads of that in every publication now. Look, you'll even read an op-ed in the New York Times that is clearly slanted in one direction. And so that challenge of keeping, partisanship and an agenda and a side out of news is the biggest challenge that journalists face. And it's a fascinating one. I think it's a fascinating time to be a journalist. It kind of makes me miss it a little bit, but I also feel, working at Twitter, that I'm very ingrained, still very in the middle of it. Twitter it's where things happen, where the news unfolds.
I think our news has just developed another layer.
Yeah.
So in a way, we're all kind of journalists.
Exactly. You could see something.
I'm doing broadcast journalism.
True, and you could also be somewhere, and I think this is another thing I like Twitter for. Whenever I've been somewhere and I've heard, I was somewhere once and I thought I heard gunshots, and I was scared, and I went on Twitter to see if were people tweeting around me, did anyone else hear a gunshot? It can be that real time, and
right.
And you can be the journal. I mean, you see all these videos, it's awful, but a police officer has pulled somebody over, something happens with an officer, and they catch it on camera.
Right. And that's happening a lot lately. I mean, it's happening in every sector.
Right. Yeah. But that idea that with our mobile device, whatever device you have, we are one button push away from documenting our experience. And then the question is, what kind of an experience are we documenting, and through what lens? Are we
Well, that's the thing. Like, journalists were always unbiased. I mean, that was the common core.
That was the core
with journalism, is that there was almost like a certain code of ethics.
Yeah.
That they are going to give it in a non-opinionated, unbiased way. And I think we've really strayed from that, because everybody's kind of tweeting and doing their own thing, so it's made things looser. By the way, did you see that article that came out? It drove me crazy that flossing is now bad for you.
Oh, God.
I mean, now this is the difference between fake news and conspiracy. That is not a conspiracy, I don't think. That was just fake news. And I thought, wow, I cannot believe that they were allowed to print this. They were saying that there hasn't been enough studies to prove that it works. And meanwhile, they have a massive amount of information that says that it's good for your heart. You can see the bacteria levels go down. You can see people that floss, their gums don't bleed. Everybody should floss. So, I mean, but I was like so floored that was there. And I was reading it with my own eyes that I actually thought, did some dentist write this? Because he wants us to go, there's this, is there a counter, is there some sort of a
alternative agenda
to get people to kind of fall backwards and need more help, need to spend more money instead of, I was shocked.
I mean, first of all, I was kind of hoping that story was true so I could like floss a little bit less. You're killing me that it's okay. So I still have to keep flossing.
Yes, you do.
All right. Well, I think medicine in general, I'm no medicine expert. I think you know your way around it a lot better than I do, but I think that's where a lot of conspiracy theory can come into play. I mean, how often have you heard this medication is sort of a it's like a temporary fix for some of our worst ailments instead of the ultimate fix, because you need to keep people on this or that, or you want to draw the similar kind of conspiracy theory is that they make iPhones or they make this or that technology break every couple of years, so you have to go in and get a new one.
Definitely. So is there a difference between fake news and conspiracy theories, or are they like one of the same?
I think the conspiracy theory is kind of more driven by the consumer than it is the journalist, in a way, if that makes sense. It's more like the stories are out there, and if the stories aren't true, then they're fake news. That's as simple as that. The conspiracy theory is when we extrapolate and say the reason behind it is this. We assume that there is that alternative agenda behind the fake news. And, I think oftentimes that's a fair assumption to make. I think a lot of the fake news that's proliferated and that's out there, there's a reason for it. It's not like they just got it wrong. They got the facts wrong. It's that they're trying to push this
side. A hidden agenda,
right?
As
and
you said,
oftentimes not so hidden.
Ulterior motive,
right? The ulterior motive. And I'm pretty weary or conscious of those things, but I think it's pretty easy to pick out fake news, because your best bet, and for me, my best bet, is looking at journalistic sources from both sides. If we know we live in a partisan news world these days where it's hard to get the straight story without at least some partisan color, then it's important to look at both sides. You can't just read Fox News without reading MSNBC. You can't just watch MSNBC without checking out Fox News.
Right.
Because
there are a lot of people, by the way, that just tune into Fox.
I know.
Because they feel that the other is fake news. But it's funny, because the people that do watch CNN and the people that do watch these things, a lot of times they do watch everything.
Right.
Because they want to be educated.
And I try to, because it's when I see a story on the one side corroborated by the other, then I'm like, that's not fake news. That's when we can agree to something happening to a fact on both sides of sort of the partisan coin, I'm pretty confident then that you're reading something that's true. And that's nice. It shouldn't have to come to that. Oftentimes it does. And then there are a couple of sources that I still very much trust in and believe in. I do think the New York Times and the Washington Post remain sort of the a couple of those pillars of journalism that they go by the books, like what you said, that there used to be this. And I still think I don't think
I think a lot of journalists try to, but then it's getting blurry.
Well,
I think,
but I don't think I went to journalism school, and everything we were taught and everything that was kind of pushed to us was above all else ethical, just being honest and truthful, and there really is, there's so much pride in that, and so much strength and conviction with those things. I think for up and coming journalists, for the next wave of journalists, especially right now when their credibility has been attacked so much,
right?
That I think we're on our way to a renaissance of all of that.
There's like a revolution. It's going to lead to a renaissance.
I think so.
I hope so.
Yeah,
that's a beautiful thought.
Yeah, I think.
And you heard it here. You heard it here.
When the Renaissance happens, we called it, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I told you this when I was telling you about some of the stuff I've done, but did I ever tell you I spent a lot of time in Russia?
No.
When I was at Cal Arts, I went over there and I did a documentary. That was sort of my project. And anyway, so I got to live with this family and I really loved it at the time. And I don't know if they still have this. I should find out, but their main newspaper was called Eta Pravda.
Okay.
Eta Pravda means it is truth. So they actually had a newspaper called This is the Truth.
That's great.
And all of the people that lived there that were discerning and wanted to educate themselves, they said exactly what you just said, that they read everything, because so much of Eta Pravda was not the truth.
Okay. Fake news right up on the the headline there, or like the title itself. They were kind of full of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's funny that they would actually tell people. I mean, that's another fake news.
The truth is literally the name of it. Yeah. Well, right. I mean, and then there are places in the world where, well, you talk about like in North Korea, where every piece of news is printed by the state, right? And so some of it might be true, right? A lot of it might be true, but it's all with an agenda. All of it is agenda written, right?
So in North Korea, they only have one publication, I think or they only have one streaming thing of information.
And there's no Twitter in North Korea.
No.
So there isn't sort of
no
that
social media.
Right. There's no stream of kind of anyone can tell it like it is, or the citizen journalist, so to speak.
Well, maybe it's this, Josh. Maybe that social media and Twitter is giving us a bigger umbrella of freedom, and when anything is first born, it lacks the boundaries. So maybe it will come back to a place where we'll be able to have healthy boundaries. I don't know.
That's now we're getting too optimistic. No, I'm kidding. I love the optimism. I think there are certain things in life that are just they're gonna go with the flow. It's like the ocean. We can't control the waves of the ocean. It's like you talk about metaphysical, like we can get there like pretty quick.
I love that but I love that comparison.
But it's when you're talking about that many people all having this instantaneous access to spreading of information, sharing information, I don't see how there's really we'll make improvement. We'll always make improvements. We'll find ways to filter. I think the thought process around fake news, for instance, was something like a Twitter. How cool would it be if instead of the trends that you see that the trends you would see in that trending column on Twitter, that there'd be some sort of a verification process that nothing can trend unless it's...
Well, I think Facebook was trying to do that because so many people were getting their news from Facebook.
Right. And I think Twitter is trying to do it. I think both, are thinking these ways. But then you'd argue, right? So, if I say nothing can trend unless it's true, but if people are talking about something, that's how trending works on Twitter, right? That algorithm that we built basically lifts a conversation, let's say a hashtag or a keyword, it lifts it to the forefront if enough people are talking about it. And it's an acceleration model too. It's not about, like, let's say Justin Bieber gets 2 million mentions today and he gets 2.2 million mentions tomorrow. He probably won't trend either day because he's sort of on a steady curve. But if
But it'd be spikes.
If Justin Bieber punched somebody and made all the paparazzi headlines and stuff, and he got 5 million mentions, he'd spike, his conversation would spike, and he would probably trend.
Wow, that's algorithms.
That's the algorithm.
Interesting.
So the idea is, like, you know, there could be a fake news item that's getting that pickup and that acceleration in conversation, and it might trend, and more people will read it. Maybe more people will believe it and be misled by it.
And then it becomes reality.
But what I think is really great about that open source of conversation and communication is that so many people tweeting about that topic, that fake news topic, are tweeting, "This is fake news. This is fake. You take note." And I think the conversation, because it's so open and because people are all able to attack it from their perspective, you tend to get to the truth pretty quickly, because the majority often kind of gets to that point. You know, 4 million people tweet about a subject, probably at least 3 million are going to be telling you what really happened. And then there's that crowd that's being either misled or maybe driven by an agenda. But more often than not, people know that this is a platform for what's happening and information, and the truth will usually win out. I do believe in that.
Definitely revolutionary. I mean, I don't know if Twitter has changed a lot since you've been there. I mean, you mentioned that now you can use the characters without it taking away from.
Yeah.
But has it changed? Have you seen any changes since you've been there? Or?
I mean, with the product, you mean? More?
Yeah, like has it
the biggest change that I'm proud to
evolved at all?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest criticism Twitter gets is abuse on the platform, right? Trolling and people, because with everything we've talked about, one thing we haven't talked about is that it's such an open space to attack someone verbally, right? You can be cruel on
You can
Twitter.
be bullied.
You can be bullied on Twitter, and it happens to celebrities. It happens to average Joes like me. Like, it could happen to anybody.
Right, like almost like stalking, right?
Yeah,
like
or
that kind of thing.
Right, and so I think the thing that's changed the most in my year since I've been there is an awareness, a realization by Jack Dorsey, by the leadership there, and everybody down the list, of what an issue that is and how it was impacting a user's experience, making them not necessarily want to come back. And so much change has happened on that front. Like, it feels like every week or every other week there's a new product rollout, a new tool. You can mute these words, you can block these users, you can hide this kind of a conversation, you can report this kind of
I want to thank Jack Dorsey. I mean, you never hear about the people behind it.
Well, and it's not, and
it
I'm
seems
sure
like such a massive.
It is. Well, I'm sure if he was listening to this, I'm sure he's not, but if he heard it, he would be like, "Don't thank me, thank the thousands of people working at Twitter that are making this a priority and fixing it and doing it with hard work, with engineering, with a mindset toward making it better for people, safer for people." There's a heartbeat and a pulse. I like working at Twitter because I do think there's a heartbeat and a pulse in what we're doing, and that we feel like what we're putting out to the world makes a big difference, and it really does make shape or
Well, it's changed. I think it's changing our consciousness.
So, and I think I agree, and I think we take that to heart, and so it's critical to make people feel safe there. That's like the first thing you have to do. Even before combating the fake news and stuff, you have to combat, the bullying, the harassment, and make sure that before we can get into what's true and what's not true, that we just can all coexist together and not be, uncomfortable or upset when we're.
If you think about it, the people in North Korea, if they had Twitter, if they had social media, they would be so much less affected by a dictator because they could really communicate. It keeps, and they would have ways of getting more information. I mean, that's the thing that happened in World War II in Nazi Germany. There was only the government broadcast.
Right.
People didn't have all these sides, and they couldn't discern between what was right or what was wrong, and there was a brainwashing effect.
It was propaganda. The media message was singularly filtered through one voice and one sort of agenda, and I think that's what it's like in North Korea, but I don't know, and you don't know because
we're probably not gonna,
and we're not gonna find out anytime soon. But we're totally blocked out from it, right? We're not, just as much as they can't access
us,
the rest of our
right.
world and what we do, we can't access what they're thinking or doing, and it's sad. And you'd love, you know, when we think about what good Twitter can do for the world, or any social platform can do for the world, it's kind of heartbreaking to think that there are parts of the world where, you know, there's nothing we can do. There can be a humanitarian crisis, and we're kind of powerless. That's one of those items that we'd add to our list of, a cause or something we should do, that you can almost cross off right away, because there is not, we can't get in, we can't digitally communicate, we can't, you know, make face-to-face contact. So it's a hard, it's like a tough one to swallow, because, you know, you're just powerless, kind of. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think the places that don't have social media are at an enormous disadvantage for a million different reasons. I mean, even like the country would thrive from it too. You know, the leadership would thrive from it, seeing how things are done in other places, and, you know, benefiting from the global conversation. You know, you benefit from that. Like when we make the world a smaller place, we find solutions to the problems that we all face. Like, you know, we have problems here that they have there, that they could learn from. We could learn from their solutions. So
no, I do really like your take on things, because I suddenly see that consciousness is expanding. This is an expansiveness, which, if used in the right way, can only be a great humanitarian thing.
Sure.
But I do have to say that this morning I woke up and my phone was dead, and I didn't go online. And for about an hour, I was like, I was in some weird bliss.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds really strange.
No,
but
that doesn't sound strange.
I kind of, you know, I was charging my phone. I just didn't bother looking at it. I was getting ready to go to the gym, and I made my coffee, and I was looking outside, and for a moment, I felt like I was in my 20s again, living in Europe. I felt completely in my own little bubble.
Yeah.
And I just saw things through my own filter, and it was like taking a vacation.
Totally. You can take time away from social. You do take essentially a vacation. It's a totally different, like, consciousness, really. I can't detach from my email for so much as 20 minutes, 30 minutes. If I don't check my email in 20 or...
Do you do it when you first wake up, though?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, immediately. See what happens if you can't. You just can't.
I don't know that I can, because and then I just wouldn't sleep. Like, well, I guess I've woken up at that point, but I wouldn't, like, breathe well. I would be thinking, what if something's come in that's urgent that I'm
even on a Saturday?
Even on a Saturday. That is one of the things with the job I have. It feels very kind of always on.
Yeah.
You know, it keeps you on your game, but it's also a bit, you know, it can be exhausting at some point. But like it's both email and Twitter. I do check both in the morning, right when I wake up. And that's a lot to take in every morning. Like for me,
how long does that take you?
Yeah,
a good hour.
Oh no, I can do it in 10 minutes.
Because I don't know how many tweets you're reading,
right?
How many emails you're reading.
So
you just kind of like scroll down quickly.
I scroll for critical, sort of like urgent email stuff, and then from email I'll go right to Twitter. And with Twitter, I'll hit the explore button, which is where you see all the trends and the moments of the day. And moments is where I go to first. I think moments, for those who are new to Twitter, I think it's a really good way to orient yourself.
I know. I'm going to listen to this
go
again.
Back to it? Okay.
Yes.
So explore button, scroll down to moments. And if you tap into the moments, it's basically all the biggest stories in the world that are unfold, things that are happening in the world, both entertainment and silly kind of fun stuff, as well as, you know,
so just what's trending, I guess.
It is, but a moment on Twitter is sort of a curated series of tweets that tell a story. Mm-hmm. We have an editorial team, and we talked about fake news. You know, this moments category is really valuable to me, because our editorial team is in place to tell only true stories, mm-hmm. or stories at least that are, you know, based in fact, mm-hmm. right? Based in some sort of like honest conversation that's happening on the platform. Right. So, you know, you'll tap into one of those moments. There's a cover image, and then you sweep through tweets, and it's basically different influential people, sometimes not so influential people who, you know, just made a really on point comment about this unfolding narrative. And it's through that collection of tweets, anywhere, let's say from 5 to 20 different tweets, that that you get sort of the full narrative of, you know, whatever just happened. You know, it could be this actor was cast in this new movie, and the first is from the actor itself. Excited to be cast in this new movie, and then all these reactions from journalists and fans who kind of flesh out the story and tell it. So that's where I'll go in the morning to just see the big 10 or 11 kind of things that have happened. And God forbid if there was an attack in
Right.
London or something like that, the top moment is going to be that. You can count on it, and that. So, that's a hard thing to wake up to. And then, I shouldn't complain. I'm on the other corner of the globe, and I'm not so directly immediately impacted.
But we feel like we are,
but we feel it,
and we get it. It comes to us.
Yeah, and it's the first thing we see in the morning.
Hello.
There we go. We're back.
But you know what, Josh? Since we were kind of like, I wanted to actually talk to you about your dictionary. I thought that would be really cool. You had said that would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then I can play that over and I can learn.
So I'm trying to
4 weeks in a row.
Knocking over the snowball.
So I'm trying to think what I meant or you meant when you said dictionary. Like, let's get to the So you mean like the terminology and the ideas?
Yeah,
behind...
it's almost like we've reorchestrated our language to a character's. Sort of like if you take a look at Chinese, it's characters, and now we've added all these characters, which 10, 15 years ago we didn't have.
Right. Sure. So I mean, there's a different language on Twitter than there is on Facebook, than there is on Snapchat, than there is on Instagram. I think Twitter is kind of like the most insidery of them all, in that there are little like kind of quirks and things that people do. Like even like the app mentions. There was a way, the way that you can mention another user without actually posting on that user's wall directly. Like you want to tweet on your wall. You don't want to write them a message that just goes to their page. So you have to put the period in front of the at mention. You've probably seen that before. So there are those little quirks and sort of shorthand for,
and that's probably going to evolve more and more as well.
Absolutely.
There should be a dictionary.
Oh yeah. No,
there should be
like an actual Twitter dictionary
that you can maybe.
There's got to be like a they make those like whatever for dummies.
Yes,
this or that for
it's
dummies.
Called for idiots.
Twitter for idiots or whatever.
That's what I need.
I think I might need it too, actually.
No, there's no way you would need that.
No, but I mean,
you're writing it.
No, I got to do a little homework then. But no, the once upon a time when the little heart button on Twitter was a favorite. Formerly, it's now like. Or some people call it a heart, like, oh, you hearted this. That's great. You must love it.
Yeah.
But it's a like, essentially. And Facebook has likes as well, right? So the like term is sort of the
kind of my cat, by the way. If you were just wondering if there was a creature over there, I don't know.
We're probably picking that up pretty loud and clear.
Yes, I know. Sorry.
Okay. So there's likes, there's retweets. You're familiar with retweets and sort of the ultimate sharing mechanism. I think that's one of Twitter's best ever ideas or inventions, is the idea of a retweet. Now we have quote tweets as well. So you can directly sort of spit back out the tweet that you saw if you just want it shared to your followers with a retweet.
Yeah.
The quote.
Do you have room to write about it, or is there not enough room?
That's what a quote tweet is. A quote tweet is you are basically retweeting with your own spin on top of it. You can then create your own.
So it doesn't take more, if it goes over 140 characters.
Between the two, technically, you can exceed 140 because you have a fresh 140 with the quote tweet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you're able.
Very smart.
Yeah, well, that's a critical thing too, because if Twitter is the conversation platform, we really think of it that way. You can't. It shouldn't always just be a regurgitation of somebody else's message, but it should be okay, this is your message, here's my reaction. It's a reaction tool, right? It's a reaction to your message. And then somebody can quote tweet, and like build on a sort of a digital conversation that goes one layer after the next. And that's I think that's the core of the product and the service and what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, never before in the history of anybody's lives have they been able to follow moment by moment what the politicians are saying.
Exactly.
And, I mean,
And to be fair, like, while Donald Trump is best known for being the, tweeter in chief and like the guy that uses it so much, almost every politician today not only has a Twitter account, but it's one of their main forms of communication. Like it is a pretty global tool now for all of that. And
do you think Angela Merkel, does she have a Twitter account?
That's a great question, actually.
I have to check it out.
I know. I want to say she does, but I don't think she's necessarily an active tweeter.
Maybe not.
But I shouldn't speak to it without knowing. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be curious. And if she's not, it doesn't mean she won't be in a couple of years.
I'm sure she'll probably catch up.
Yeah, because it's just the way things are heading, and it's the way you can, I think we shouldn't be afraid of having a direct conversation with people, where the fewer filters sometimes, the better the message can be relayed. And I think that's why politicians use it. If they use it, they want to talk directly to their constituent instead of talking to the journalist. But the journalist, that only holds them more accountable, keeps them more honest to take that message and keep it in context and tell it the right way. Because if they don't, if they spin it, or they take a side or have an agenda, then people can move further and further away from that and again go directly to the people with their message. It's critical that journalists can take that same sort of approach of trying to keep the message as unfiltered,
as clean
as possible. Yeah. Or unfiltered as well. Filtered, unfiltered. Yes, clean. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Without additives. Think about diet.
Right. No sugar. No.
So one more question for you. Like, how do you think this is changing? I mean, I think we probably touched on this, but in terms of how Twitter will continue to evolve.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have conversations between Donald Trump and Angela Merkel on Twitter that we can both read.
That's a great point.
We can read their whole conversation.
Well,
where's this going?
The best, and so I work more on the movie. I work with movie brands to help them tell their story on Twitter. And the very best movie marketers, the best, CPG or auto brands, they do just that. They actually play off of this. It's almost like watching a reality show, but watching it on Twitter, where they have conversations between like iconic brands. So, for example, the movie Deadpool, which was a huge hit, kind of harder R superhero thing that Fox did a couple years ago, or about a year ago. That character's voice was basically channeled through their Twitter handle. Like, this was kind of a racy, very off color.
Was it? Like, I didn't.
Yeah, it is. It's like a rated R. It's a fun, but kind of like push the boundaries of the superhero genre.
Right.
And it
push
did.
the boundaries for 13-year-olds.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't think the 13-year-old could get in without some serious supervision on that one. But the voice of that character, which is the Ryan Reynolds played character, was the Twitter voice, and that voice would tweet at, let's say, Hugh Jackman, who plays Wolverine, and say, like, hey, Wolverine, like, I challenge you to a blah, 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 that kind of thing. Like, that playful conversation unfolding between brands or fictional characters or celebrities, and celebrities talking on Twitter to one another.
Is that happening now?
Oh, yeah. It happens.
I thought of this amazing idea.
Well, no, your point to it on the politics front is really interesting, and perhaps not in good taste, perhaps in good taste. A lot of people would argue diplomacy and, the biggest conversations shouldn't happen publicly for a world on the world stage.
Well,
right?
Yeah, it kind of goes with what we were saying before, is how much do we need to know?
Right. Do we really want, well, the answer is yes. I really do want to know what Donald Trump and Angela Merkel are talking. Like, that's fascinating. I would love to know what that conversation entails. Do I have any right to know? Probably not. It's probably way beyond my pay grade, as they say. But, in the right context, especially if it's playful or if it's more just, for instance, today I think Donald Trump tweeted thanking the Chinese president for visiting, him and his wife for visiting. They were in Florida, Trump's estate.
Right.
And he said, we hosted this beautiful family. I don't think he tagged the Chinese president in his tweet, which would have been interesting. Had he tagged the president,
then he could have answered.
It's or it would have been on his radar, right? So maybe he could have replied to the tweet, and that's sort of where you get into that conversation, where they're not talking about diplomacy in the world stage, but they're talking about they're playing nice on the just niceties between one another, and that's fascinating. It'd be fascinating for both sides, constituents, for the American people and the Chinese people to watch their leaders have this conversation back and forth. Now that I think about it, I don't believe China has Twitter. So I'm
yeah, I was wondering why he didn't tag him, but it would make sense if they don't.
No Twitter in China.
Because
there you go.
I mean,
yeah. So there's a few places that are a little bit closed off to it still, and I know North Korea, and China, and a few others. But yeah, but the point being, the point is taken, and it's an interesting point. Like, when do we draw the line of again, if I said before, Twitter is where you talk to or connect with people you wish you know. It's also the place where, so it's like that bridge between you and an influencer and a celebrity, somebody you don't know. But it's also the bridge between those influential people. Like, they can have that conversation there too. And you wonder, how much is too much. But it's fascinating to see how that'll evolve in the coming years.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating to see how communication is shifting with all of this.
It is. We'll have this conversation in a year and everything will be different.
Everything will be different. Yeah. And also, like I said, 100 years from now, people are going to be able to study us as a society. I mean, think about the microcosm that they'll learn about I don't know what life was like really about from the 17th century unless I read an author from that time.
They're going to have more information about us than they're going to want in 100 years. They'll look back and they'll be like, enough already. 2017, we get it. We know everything about you.
They'll try to do everything the opposite.
I know. They'll change it all up. Well, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe we're not doing things as badly as we think we are.
Well, it's interesting. It's going to be there for all of prosperity to see forever and ever.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for coming.
Oh my God, this was so fun.
Was it? Yeah, you are so good at podcasts.
Stop.
When's the last time you did one?
It's been a while, but I used to do some sports ones. I did a ESPN LA thing with a friend and colleague, and I need to do that again at some point. Sports is really my first love and passion, but this is so fascinating and fun too, and you're a great chat. It's fun
thank
to
you.
To you, so.
Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we should wrap it up. Do you have anything else you want to add while I wrap it up?
I'm glad you had me on. It was fun to talk. And
thank you.
I mean, this is a form of communication too. I mean, the podcast is one of the many ways we talk to one another. It's amazing how many people, look, it didn't take us 3 hours to set this up and do this. It's doable.
Pretty hands-on.
To just start talking to, hundreds or thousands or whatever people, and just like that, and that's in and of itself amazing, and how far we've come.
I know, for sure. All right. Well, thank you, Josh Weinstock, for coming. I loved having you on the show. I wish I could bring you again. I wish I could bring you all the time.
Thank you.
But thank you for coming. We are not going to be here next week. Next week's Easter. So enjoy your Easter Sunday, whether you do that or Passover. Enjoy your holiday. It's going to be a great holiday, family, friends, introspective, if you will, weekend. But we'll see you here in 2 weeks on Metaphysically Speaking with Mystic Madison and a new guest. So come on back. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
It's not turning off. We're still on.
Cool.